train rattled and swayed. Young Thomas, barely a man, gripped his rifle tightly. His knuckles were white, his heart pounded in his chest. He had never left his small village before. Now he was being sent to the front lines of a war he barely understood. Fear, raw and consuming, gnawed at his insides. Thomas glanced at the other young men crammed into the train carriage. Their faces were grim, reflecting the same apprehension that he felt. Many were trying to appear brave, singing patriotic songs and boasting of the victories to come. But Thomas saw the fear in their eyes, the fear that haunted his own dreams. The landscape outside the train window blurred into a dull green and brown canvas. Each mile traveled took them further away from everything familiar, everything safe. Every chug of the engine brought them closer to the abyss. Thomas closed his eyes, trying to conjure up images of home, of his mother, of the girl he had walked with just a few weeks before. But the images were fading, replaced by the grim reality of his situation. He was a soldier now, heading towards a conflict that promised only suffering and death. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, was the spark that ignited the powder keg of Europe. But the fuse had been burning for decades. Nationalism, imperialism, and a complex web of alliances had created a tinderbox of tension, ready to explode. The great powers of Europe, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Russia, France, and Great Britain viewed each other with suspicion and distrust. Each nation sought to expand its influence and power, leading to a dangerous arms race and a series of diplomatic crises. The Balkans, a region simmering with ethnic and nationalist tensions, became the focal point of this escalating rivalry. Austria-Hungary, eager to assert dominance in the Balkans, saw the assassination of the Archduke as an opportunity to crush Serbian nationalism. Germany, eager to support its ally and expand its own influence, issued Austria-Hungary a blank check of support. The Western Front, a 400-mile scar of mud, blood and barbed wire stretching across France and Belgium. It was here that the war descended into a horrific stalemate. Both sides dug into elaborate trench systems, protected by machine guns, artillery and barbed wire. Millions of men were trapped in these muddy, rat-infested trenches, facing an enemy they could barely see. Life in the trenches was a living hell. Disease was rampant. Trenchfoot, a painful and debilitating condition caused by prolonged exposure to damp and unsanitary conditions, was common. Rats, feeding on the corpses that littered no man's land, were everywhere. The constant shelling and sniper fire took a heavy toll on the soldiers' morale. Men lived in a constant state of fear and tension, never knowing when their luck might run out. Death was ever present, a constant companion in this subterranean nightmare. The battles of Verdun and the Somme epitomized the brutal futility of the First World War. At Verdun, the Germans launched a massive offensive in February 1916, aiming to bleed the French army white. The French, determined to hold their ground, declared, "They shall not pass." The battle raged for months, each side throwing hundreds of thousands of men into a meat grinder of artillery fire and machine gun barrages. The Somme, launched by the British and French in July 1916, was intended to relieve the pressure on Verdun and achieve a decisive breakthrough. But the German defences proved formidable. On the first day of the battle, the British army suffered over 57,000 casualties, the bloodiest day in its history. By the time the mud of autumn brought both battles to a close, over 1 million men had been killed or wounded. Neither battle resulted in a decisive victory, only a horrific waste of human life. Section 5. A world ablaze, global conflagrations. While the Western Front became synonymous with the horrors of trench warfare, the First World War was a truly global conflict. The vast empires of Europe drew their colonial subjects into the vortex of war, turning a European conflict into a global conflagration. In Africa, colonial troops from British, French, German and Belgian colonies fought in brutal campaigns. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire, allied with Germany, faced off against British and Arab forces. The Gallipoli campaign, a disastrous attempt by the Allies to capture Constantinople, resulted in heavy casualties on both sides. From the beaches of Gallipoli to the plains of East Africa, the war raged on, leaving a trail of destruction and bitterness in its wake. Section 6. The Yanks are coming. America enters the fray. For the first 3 years of the war, the United States remained neutral, watching the carnage in Europe with a mixture of horror and fascination. However, a number of factors, including Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare and the Zimmermann telegram, gradually shifted American public opinion in favor of intervention. In April 1917, the United States declared war on Germany, bringing the industrial might and vast resources of the world's newest superpower to bear on the exhausted combatants. The arrival of fresh American troops, along with vital supplies and equipment, provided a much-needed boost to the Allied war effort. Section 7. A flawed peace. The Treaty of Versailles. After 4 long years of war, an armistice was finally declared on November 11, 1918. The guns fell silent and the world breathed a collective sigh of relief. But the peace that followed proved to be fragile and flawed. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war but sowed the seeds for future conflict. Germany, blamed for the war and burdened with crippling reparations, felt humiliated and resentful. The treaty redrew the map of Europe, creating new nations but also new tensions. The failure to address the underlying causes of the war, combined with the harsh treatment of Germany, created a volatile peace. The stage was set for another, even more devastating conflict. Section 8. The Enduring Legacy, World War I and the 20th Century. The First World War was a watershed moment in human history. It shattered empires, redrew the map of Europe, and ushered in a new era of global conflict and instability. The war's technological innovations, from machine guns and tanks to poison gas and airplanes, forever changed the nature of warfare. The war also had a profound impact on the social, political, and cultural landscape of the 20th century. It led to the rise of totalitarian ideologies, hastened the decline of European empires, and ushered in an era of social and political upheaval. Section 9. Lest we forget. Remembering for a more peaceful future. The First World War was a tragedy of epic proportions. Millions of lives were lost, and countless others were forever scarred by the horrors they witnessed. As we commemorate the centenary of this cataclysmic conflict, it is imperative that we remember the sacrifices made and the lessons learned. We must never forget the horrors of war and the devastating consequences of unchecked nationalism, militarism, and intolerance. We must strive to build a world where dialogue, diplomacy, and understanding prevail over violence and aggression. The memory of the millions who perished in the trenches of the First World War must serve as a constant reminder of the fragile nature of peace and the importance of safeguarding it for future generations.